Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith. Some Pennsylvania programs providing support to the state's homeless population are shocked after receiving word that their services fall under the president's Ending Radical and Wasteful Government DEI Programs and Preferencing Executive Order. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Christina Langell. Christina, what programs did this executive order impact?
Well, it impacts probably facets of almost every area of government. So it impacts a lot. So we specifically saw this issue coming up with the homeless programs in Harrisburg as a result of the executive order. Programs got word early this week that on Friday, HUD had been ordered to cease working on certain funding projects. So specifically, those would be anything that involved DEI or environmental justice. Then later on Tuesday, we saw the president order the broader pause on all funding that could be affected by this. But when we look at the language of the executive order that initially prompted this, you see that it applies to a lot. So when we talk about environmental justice, those are specific areas. Like in Pennsylvania, you have specially designated environmental justice areas that if you wanted to build on or do any kind of construction project, you would have to go through certain benchmarks with the Department of Environmental Protection to even be able to be considered to use that land. That's largely because there are areas that are more susceptible to or have been disproportionately harmed by environmental issues. So oftentimes in lower income areas, you'll see higher rates of things like lead in the water or paint, lead paint usage, asbestos, air pollution, and other environmental toxins. So it's really important to some people to protect those areas and give extra attention to making sure that they are not suffering disproportionately from environmental pollution. So that takes up a huge amount of things. The executive order specifically says, terminate to the maximum extent allowed by law all DEI, DEIA, and environmental justices offices and positions, equity plans, equity actions, initiatives, or programs equity-related grants or contracts. So anything that involves that environmental justice issue, and then anything that involves DEI. And that's where it gets really sticky because DEI is a very broad category. So DEI, I mean, a lot of people, it's been such a buzzword lately. I don't even know if everyone knows what it stands for, but it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. And sometimes in companies, you'll also see it as diversity, engagement, and inclusion. But in any case, equity is about providing basically an equal playing field for all different kinds of groups. So by its very nature, that does often amount to privileging or benefiting groups that have been historically underserved so that they are able to get to an equal footing with groups that have historical privilege. So that's not just LGBTQ issues or race issues. That also includes people who are veterans, people who suffer from disabilities, people who have just historically been in low-income groups, people who have suffered from mental health issues or substance abuse. So it's huge swaths of the population. And when you look at something like a homelessness program, it's serving a lot of different groups who are impacted by some or all of those factors. So when you say, anything that involves DEI loses its funding, then you could essentially make arguments for pretty much anything that the government funds that it involves DEI to some extent. So what's not super clear is whether they're looking at the hiring practices of these groups, whether that has too much emphasis on DEI, such that perhaps like certain groups of people are being hired at higher rates than others or privileged over others, or if they're talking about the people that they're serving, because almost any social program in the country is directed at helping people who are in an inequitable position. So they are mostly DEI.
Christina, thanks for joining us today. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.